I was the civil engineer who built the city's skyline, but on my 72nd birthday, I found myself locked in a beige room with barred windows. My own son tricked me into a nursing home, snatched my phone, my wallet, my ID, my bank cards, even the watch my late wife gave me, looked me and said, "You're worthless now. You're nothing but human garbage that pollutes my life." He thought I was helpless, but he didn't know the facility director was my oldest friend. We didn't stop him immediately. We waited until he stood in front of a judge to claim my assets. Then we dropped a projection screen and played 4K footage of his crimes. Before I tell you about the janitor clause that forced him to scrub floors for redemption, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And please subscribe if you believe that betrayal deserves a heavy price. Those cruel words hung in the sterile air of the lobby like toxic smoke. I tried to pull my arm free, but at 72 years old, my physical strength was no match for a man in his prime, even if that man was the son I had raised with every ounce of love I possessed. Just 2 hours ago, I had been standing in front of the full-length mirror in my downtown penthouse, adjusting the silk tie of my best navy blue suit. The sunlight was streaming across the framed photographs of my late wife Bernice, and I had felt a foolish flutter of hope. Marcus had called me the day before with a voice smooth as velvet, promising a birthday celebration I would never forget. He said we were going to the Capitol Grill, which was my favorite spot to mark my 72nd year. I had looked at my reflection and thought that maybe this was the day we finally bridged the distance that had grown between us, since he took over the family real estate firm. I was a sentimental old fool blinded by the desperate need to be loved by his only child. I should have known the moment I got into his car. The drive over here had been a masterclass in tension. Marcus refused to look me in the eye, tapping his fingers on the leather steering wheel of his black SUV with a nervous, erratic rhythm, checking his phone every 30 seconds as if waiting for a bomb to detonate. When I tried to ask him about his wife Keisha or my granddaughter Jasmine, he turned up the volume on the radio, drowning out my voice with blaring commercial pop music. "I prefer the quiet, Dad," he had snapped, and I had apologized. Actually apologized for trying to speak to my own son on my birthday. Now, standing on the polished linoleum of Cedar Grove Manor, the blindfold was ripped off. Marcus turned to the intake nurse, a woman who looked at her clipboard to avoid witnessing the family tragedy unfolding in front of her. "My father is confused," Marcus lied, his voice steady and practiced. "He has become aggressive and his dementia is advancing rapidly. We can no longer care for him at home without risking the safety of my children." "I am not confused," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and sorrow. "I am Isaiah Washington. I am the civil engineer who calculated the load-bearing stress for the West Side Bridge and the structural integrity of the Freedom Tower. I know exactly who I am and I know exactly what you are doing." Marcus ignored me, handing the nurse a thick manila envelope that I suspected contained falsified medical records. "See what I mean?" he whispered to her, with a sad, sympathetic shrug. "The paranoia is the worst part. He thinks everyone is plotting against him." The nurse nodded with professional pity and buzzed the inner door open. "Let's go, Mr. Washington," she said, in that condescending sing-song voice reserved for toddlers and the dying. Marcus pushed me forward and we walked down a long hallway that smelled of industrial lemon cleaner and urine masked by cheap potpourri. We passed rooms where elderly people sat in wheelchairs staring at blank walls, waiting for visitors who would never come. Is this my future? I wondered. Is this how the story of my life ends, fading away in a beige box while my son spends the fortune I built with my own hands? We reached room 104. It was small and cold, furnished with a bed that looked as hard as a slab of concrete, and a single window overlooking a brick wall. Marcus shoved me inside and closed the door behind us. The mask of the concerned son dropped instantly, replaced by a sneer of pure contempt. "Hand it over," he demanded, extending his palm. What I asked, though I knew. "Everything. Your wallet, your phone, your keys. You are a ward of the state now, practically, and you don't need distractions. They might get stolen by the other residents." It was a lie, of course. He wanted to cut my lines of communication. He wanted to make sure I couldn't call my lawyer, Elijah, or the police. I reached into my pocket and handed him the leather wallet that contained my life, my credit cards, my ID, the photo of Bernice I kept in the plastic sleeve. He shoved it into his pocket without even looking at it. Then he pointed to my wrist, the watch too. I covered the gold Rolex with my other hand, stepping back. No, Marcus, not this. Your mother gave me this watch for our 40th anniversary. It is all I have left of her. Marcus laughed. A dry, humorless sound that chilled my blood. Mom is dead, Dad, and you are living in the past. This watch is worth $5,000. It will just pay for your first month here. Consider it a down payment on your new life. He grabbed my wrist and wrenched the gold timepiece free, breaking the clasp. The physical pain was sharp, but the heartbreak was dull and heavy. He checked the weight of the gold in his hand and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Listen to me closely, old man, he said, leaning in, his face inches from mine. You had a good run. You made your money. You built your buildings. But it is my turn now. I am tired of waiting for nature to take its course. I have investors to pay and a lifestyle to maintain. You are just an expensive obstacle. Stay in this room, eat your jello, and wait for the end. Do not embarrass me by trying to escape, because no one will believe a senile old man over a pillar of the community. He turned and walked out. The heavy door clicked shut, and I heard the distinct mechanical thud of a deadbolt sliding into place. I stood in the center of the room, stripped of my dignity, my history, and my freedom. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. I walked to the window and watched through the safety bars as his black SUV peeled out of the parking lot, speeding away toward the city I helped build, toward the money I earned, toward the life he stole, leaving me in a tomb he had rented by the hour. Most men in my position would have collapsed onto that thin mattress and surrendered to the crushing weight of despair, but I spent 40 years calculating how to keep skyscrapers standing in high winds and how to prevent bridges from buckling under massive loads. Panic is a structural flaw I could not afford. Instead, I took a deep breath and began to analyze my environment with the cold precision of a blueprint. I checked the window frame and noted the tamper-proof screws. I tested the door hinges and realized they were reinforced steel. This was not just a room, it was a containment unit designed to hold people until they ceased to matter. My first human contact came 2 hours later, when a young nursing assistant pushed a cart into the room. Her name tag read Brenda, and she looked exhausted. She placed a tray of lukewarm meatloaf and watery green beans on the bedside table without looking at me. "Eat up, Mr. Washington," she said mechanically. "The director hates it when we waste food, and Mr. Jenkins checks the disposal logs personally." The name hit me like a physical blow, Jenkins. I felt a jolt of electricity run up my spine. "Excuse me, Brenda," I asked, keeping my voice calm and level. "Is the director's first name Otis by any chance?" She stopped at the door and looked at me with mild surprise. "Yes, it is. Mr. Otis Jenkins. He has run Cedar Grove for 20 years. Do you know him?" A small smile touched my lips for the first time that day. Know him, I thought. I saved his life on a construction site in 1984 when a steel beam swung loose in high winds, and he saved my career when the city inspectors tried to shut down our first joint project because of the color of our skin. "Thank you, Brenda," I said softly. "I think I will eat after all." I waited in the dark as the hours ticked by, listening to the sounds of the facility settling down for the night, the squeak of rubber shoes on linoleum, the distant coughing of residents, the hum of the ventilation system. I sat upright on the edge of the bed, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for the night rounds which I knew Otis always performed himself because he was a man who believed in inspecting the foundation personally. At 11:15 the lock clicked. The door swung open, casting a wedge of hallway light across the floor. A tall figure stepped in holding a clipboard. His silhouette was unmistakable, broad shoulders slightly stooped by age, the confident gait of a man who has walked unfinished girders 50 stories in the air. "Mr. Washington, the nurse tells me you were asking about me," he said, without looking up from the chart. His voice was deeper now, raspy with age, but it still carried that distinct rhythm of authority. He flipped a page. "Says, here you were admitted for aggressive dementia and advanced cognitive decline. Let's take a look at you." He flipped the light switch and the fluorescent bulb buzzed to life. Otis looked up, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Our eyes met and the clipboard slipped from his fingers, clattering loudly onto the floor. The silence that followed was absolute. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He blinked once, then twice, as if trying to clear a hallucination. "Ike," he whispered, using the nickname only my oldest friends knew. "Ike, is that you?" I nodded slowly. "Hello, Otis. It has been a long time." He rushed forward, crossing the small room in 2 strides, and grabbed my shoulders, his grip strong and shaking. "My God, Ike." I saw the name on the intake sheet, but I thought it was a coincidence. Washington is a common name. "What in the name of heaven are you doing in a lockup unit? The chart says you are senile, that you don't know what year it is." "My son put me here, Otis," I said, my voice cracking slightly as the reality of the confession hit me. "Marcus, he tricked me. He brought me here for a birthday lunch and locked me in. He took my phone, my wallet, and Bernice's watch. He is telling everyone I lost my mind, so he can take control of the business and the properties." Rage transformed Otis's face, the shock vanishing, instantly replaced by a cold, hard fury. "That ungrateful little snake. I remember when he was born, Ike. I bought him his first baseball mitt." He turned toward the door. "I am calling the police right now. This is kidnapping. This is fraud. I will have the sheriff here in 10 minutes, and we will drag Marcus out of his house in handcuffs." "No," I said sharply, reaching out to grab his arm. "Wait, Otis. Do not call the police. Not yet." He looked at me like I was the one who was crazy. "Ike, are you listening to me? He stripped you of your rights. You can't just let him get away with it." "I am not letting him get away with anything," I said, my engineer's mind laying out the schematic of my revenge. "If we call the police tonight, Marcus will claim it was a misunderstanding. He has paperwork. He has falsified medical records. He will say I agreed to come and then got confused. He will spin it and walk away with a slap on the wrist. I need to know how deep this goes. I need to know who is helping him. I need to document the theft while he thinks I am helpless." Otis studied my face, searching for the man he had built bridges with, the man who never started a job until the blueprints were perfect. He took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "You want to set a trap? I want to inspect the structural integrity of his life, and then I want to pull the pin," I replied. "But I cannot do it from this cell. I need access, Otis. I need eyes on the outside." Otis picked up his clipboard and straightened his spine. "Okay, Ike, we do it your way. Officially, you are patient 104 with advanced dementia. Unofficially, you are my guest. Come with me. We have a suite on the 3rd floor that I keep off the main registry for VIPs and donors. It has a private line, internet, and a view of the city. Nobody goes up there but me and my head nurse." He unlocked the door and held it open. "After you, Mr. Washington. Let's get to work." While I settled into the tactical silence of the 3rd floor suite, Marcus and Keisha wasted no time celebrating their new reality. The ink on the falsified admission papers was barely dry before the spending began. It was as if a dam had burst, and 50 years of my financial discipline were being washed away by a flood of instant gratification. 3 days after my abduction, the driveway of the colonial house I had purchased for them a decade ago was suddenly occupied by a gleaming obsidian Range Rover Sport. Keisha stepped out of the driver's seat, wearing designer sunglasses that cost more than my first car. She ran her hand over the creamy leather upholstery with a sensual delight that would have turned my stomach. Marcus stood on the porch holding a glass of expensive scotch, watching her with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked like a man who had gotten away with murder and found that it paid handsomely. "You deserve it, baby," Marcus called out, raising his glass in a toast to their moral bankruptcy. "We both do. It has been a stressful year dealing with his decline, and we earned a little reward for being such patient caregivers." Keisha laughed, a sound that echoed through the neighborhood with no trace of guilt. She popped the trunk to reveal stacks of shopping bags from Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue. "I cleared out the boutique," she said. "Now that we don't have the burden of his medical bills looming over us, we can finally breathe." She didn't mention that my medical bills were non-existent because I had been perfectly healthy, or that the burden she spoke of was simply my presence at Sunday dinners. That evening, they sat on the patio planning a 2-week getaway to Turks and Caicos, booking first-class tickets in a private villa with an ocean view. They spoke about the trip not as a vacation but as a necessity, a way to recover from the trauma of putting me away. They were rewriting history in real time, painting themselves as the victims of a difficult elder who had finally been managed. But they forgot one variable in their equation of luxury and lies: my granddaughter Jasmine. She arrived unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, driving her battered Honda Civic, which she used to commute to her architectural classes at the university. Jasmine had my eyes and Bernice's spirit, sharp and incapable of tolerating nonsense. She stepped out of her car and stopped dead when she saw the Range Rover blocking the garage. She walked around, it slowly inspecting the dealer plates that screamed brand new. She entered the house through the kitchen, where Keisha was arranging exotic flowers in a crystal vase. "Mom, whose truck is that outside?" Jasmine asked, dropping her heavy backpack on the counter. Keisha jumped slightly but recovered with a practiced smile. "Oh, that. It is a little gift from your father. His business had a record quarter, and he wanted to surprise me." Jasmine narrowed her eyes. "Dad told me last week that the market was tight and he couldn't help with my tuition this semester. How did the market recover enough for an $80,000 car in 6 days?" Keisha waved her hand dismissively. "You don't understand high finance, sweetie. Things change fast. Speaking of changes, you should know that your grandfather is doing wonderful. We got an update this morning." Jasmine's posture stiffened. She had been calling my cell phone for 3 days, getting only a disconnected message. "Where is he exactly? You said he went to a specialist, but you wouldn't say where," Zurich Marcus said, entering the room with a breezy confidence that he wore like a cheap suit. He walked over and kissed Jasmine on the forehead, ignoring her tension. "He is at the Alpine Memory Clinic in Switzerland. It is the best facility in the world for aggressive dementia. Very exclusive. They don't allow personal phones because they want patients to focus on therapy." Jasmine took a step back, looking from her father to her mother. "Grandpa hates flying," she said, quietly. "He hasn't been on a plane since Grandma died. He says the pressure hurts his ears, and now you are telling me he voluntarily flew 10 hours to Switzerland without saying goodbye to me." "He was confused, Jas," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a somber whisper. "He didn't even know who I was when we put him on the plane. It was for the best. We have to trust the doctors." Jasmine didn't argue, but she didn't buy it either. I watched the scene play out later on the security feed that Otis had hacked into from their home system. I saw the doubt clouding her face. She grabbed an apple from the bowl and turned to leave. "I have to study. Tell Grandpa I love him when you talk to the Swiss doctors." Back in my suite at Cedar Grove, I sat at the mahogany desk Otis had provided, a tablet glowing in the darkness of the room. Thanks to the burner phone and the secure Wi-Fi, I had logged into my primary checking account. I watched the numbers in real time as if I were bleeding out. A charge for $5,000 at a jewelry store. The airline tickets totaling $12,000. The down payment on the car. Every transaction was a physical sting. A slap in the face of the 50 years of 60-hour work weeks I had endured. I hovered my finger over the freeze account button. One tap and their cards would be declined. The party would end, and the police would be involved. But I pulled my hand back. "Not yet," I whispered to the empty room. Stopping them now would be a mercy they hadn't earned. Let them dig the hole deeper. Let them commit to the lie, until there is no ladder long enough to climb out. I needed the theft to be grand larceny. I needed the betrayal to be absolute, so I watched my fortune drain away dollar by dollar, and let the rage harden into a cold resolve. The knock on the door came at 10 in the morning, interrupting my vigil over the bank alerts. Otis entered first, looking more amused than I had seen him in years. He stepped aside to reveal a man wearing a beige jumpsuit and holding a clipboard with the City of Chicago seal. A badge on his chest read Department of Public Health, but the shoes gave him away. They were Italian leather loafers polished to a mirror shine that cost more than the van he likely arrived in. "Hello, Isaiah," the man said, removing his safety glasses to reveal eyes that were sharp, calculating, and currently burning with a cold fire. Elijah Barnes was known in the legal world as the Shark. Because he never stopped moving and he never lost a hunt, he was my corporate counsel and my friend for 30 years. The only man besides Otis who knew where all the bodies were buried and where every dollar was hidden. "Elijah," I said, standing to shake his hand. "You look terrible in beige. It really washes you out." He didn't smile. He threw the clipboard onto the bed and pulled me into a fierce embrace. "I thought you were dead," he whispered fiercely. "When I couldn't reach you and Marcus told me you were in Europe, I had a private investigator check flight manifests. Your name wasn't on any list. Then Otis called me on the burner line last night." "Sit down, Elijah," I said, pointing to the leather armchair. "Tell me what damage he has done." Elijah opened his briefcase, which he had smuggled in under the jumpsuit. He pulled out a thick stack of documents that made my stomach turn. "He is not just spending cash, Isaiah. He is liquidating the legacy. Yesterday, he contacted a commercial real estate developer about Washington Plaza." The air left my lungs. Washington Plaza was my crown jewel, a 20-story mixed-use building in the heart of the Loop that I had designed and built in 1995. It was the project that solidified my reputation. The building where I had taken Marcus to the roof when he was 12 and told him that one day the city would look up to him the way we looked down on the streets. He is selling it, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He is trying to, Elijah corrected. He has a buyer lined up. A venture capital firm looking for a quick acquisition. The price is $5 million under market value for a quick close. Marcus is desperate for liquid cash because he has gambling debts. I uncovered in Vegas that he has been hiding from you for years. Almost $500,000 to a casino syndicate that doesn't accept payment plans. Let him do it, I said, staring out the window at the skyline where my building stood tall and proud. Elijah looked at me like I had lost the mind. Marcus claimed I had lost. Isaiah, that is a $20 million asset. If he sells it, that money is gone. We can stop this right now. I can file an emergency injunction. No. I turned back to them, feeling the cold logic of the engineer taking over. If we stop him now, it is just an attempted crime. He will claim he was acting as my power of attorney for my benefit. It becomes a civil dispute. I need him to sign the deed. I need him to stand before a notary public and forge my signature on a federal document. I need him to commit a felony so undeniable that no jury in Illinois will hesitate to convict him. Elijah nodded slowly, a predator recognizing a better trap. The closing is scheduled for next Friday. I will alert the notary quietly. We will let him hold the pen. But there is something else. Elijah continued, pulling out a bank report. This morning, Marcus walked into the main branch of Chase Bank on Michigan Avenue. He tried to access the master trust, the account holding the liquid capital for future construction projects. I smiled. A cold, grim expression. I know. I set that trap 10 years ago. Elijah grinned. Exactly. He marched up to the teller, demanding a transfer of $200,000 to his personal account. When the teller ran the request, the system flagged it immediately. Dual signature required. Level 5 security protocol. Marcus started screaming. He yelled, "Do you know who I am? I am the CEO of Washington Construction." The teller was terrified, according to the report. Elijah said, but the branch manager came out and explained that the master trust can only be accessed with your biometric thumbprint or a court order signed by a federal judge. Marcus went purple. He kicked a trash can across the lobby, and security had to escort him out. He humiliated himself in front of half the business district. He is cornered, I said, feeling no joy, only a heavy inevitability. He has the gambling debts, the lifestyle costs, and now the humiliation. A cornered animal bites. He is going to accelerate the sale of the plaza, because it is the only door he thinks is open. We are going to let him walk right through it, and when he does, the steel gate will come down behind him. Otis looked at the two of us, his face somber. You are talking about sending your son to prison, Ike. I looked at my old friend, the man who had helped me build bridges. I am not sending him anywhere, Otis. He bought the ticket. I am just making sure he catches the train. While Marcus was raging against the bank security protocols on Michigan Avenue, my granddaughter Jasmine was conducting a quiet raid on his home office in the suburbs. She had inherited my stubbornness and her mother's ability to smell a lie from a mile away. She told me later that the house felt empty and cold, even though the heat was on. She went straight to the mahogany wastebasket next to Marcus's desk, which she knew was the one place he was too careless to empty regularly. She dug through the layers of discarded drafts and coffee cups until she found a crumpled ball of yellow carbon paper. She smoothed it out on the desk surface, trembling as she read the letterhead. It did not say Alpine Memory Clinic, Zurich. It read, Cedar Grove Manor. Admission receipt $5,000, cash deposit paid by Marcus Washington. The date was March 17th, my birthday. Jasmine didn't call her parents, and she didn't call the police. She grabbed her car keys and ran out into a thunderstorm that had been brewing all afternoon. Driving like a woman possessed, the rain lashed against her windshield as she sped down the interstate, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the deluge. She arrived at the nursing home soaked to the bone and marched up to the front desk with a fury that made the receptionist recoil. I want to see Isaiah Washington, she demanded, slamming her hand on the counter. And if you tell me he is not here or that he is resting, I will scream loud enough to bring the police here myself. Otis happened to be passing through the lobby at that exact moment. He saw the resemblance immediately. The same set of the jaw, the same fire in the eyes. He stepped forward quietly and put a hand on her shoulder. You must be Jasmine, he said calmly. Your grandfather has been waiting for you. Come with me. I was sitting by the window watching the rain streak the glass when the door to my suite opened. Otis stepped aside, and there she was, looking small and fierce and heartbroken all at once. Her hair was plastered to her face and her hands were shaking. For a second she just stared at me, sitting in the armchair in my cardigan reading a newspaper, looking very much alive and very much sane. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice breaking. I dropped the paper and stood up, opening my arms. She ran to me and buried her face in my chest, sobbing with a violence that shook her whole body. I held her tight, smoothing her wet hair, whispering that it was okay, that I was safe, that I was still here. "I found the receipt," she cried into my shirt. "They told me you were in Europe. They lied to my face. Dad looked me in the eye and lied. How could they do this to you?" I led her to the sofa and sat her down, holding her hands in mine. "They are desperate, Jasmine. Greed is a powerful drug, and your father has been addicted to it for a long time. But crying time is over now. I need to know if you are strong enough for what comes next." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked at me, the sadness in her gaze hardening into anger. "I am going to kill him," she said flatly. "I am going to drive back to the house, and I am going to scream the truth until the neighbors call the cops." "No," I said sharply, my voice commanding the room. "You will do no such thing. If you confront him now, he will run. He will hide the money he has already stolen, and he will destroy the evidence of the forgery he is planning. We will lose the chance to hold him truly accountable." She looked confused. "So what do I do? Just pretend everything is fine? I need you to be a spy, Jasmine. I need you to go back into that house and act like the dutiful daughter. I need you to be my eyes and ears inside the enemy camp. I need you to record their conversations, photograph their documents, and smile while you do it. Can you do that for me?" She took a deep breath. The request was heavy. Asking a child to betray her parents is a terrible thing. But she looked at the suite, at the bars on the lower windows, at the reality of my imprisonment, and she nodded slowly. "I will burn them down, Grandpa. For you, I will burn it all down." That very night she proved her worth. She returned to her parents' house just as they were sitting down to a tense dinner. She turned on the voice recorder app on her phone and slipped it into her pocket before entering the kitchen. She kissed Marcus on the cheek and asked how his day was, knowing he had been humiliated at the bank. Later that evening, she sent me an audio file through the encrypted app Otis had installed on her phone. I sat in the dark and listened to the voice of my daughter-in-law, Keisha, the woman I had walked down the aisle because her own father was absent, the woman whose college debt I had paid off as a wedding gift. "I hope the old man croaks before the summer," Keisha said on the recording, the ice in her glass clinking as she drank. "If he hangs on for another year, the nursing home fees are going to eat into our profit margin. We need that money for the renovation. Why is he so stubborn? Why can't he just let go and die?" I listened to it 3 times, letting the hate in her voice sear into my memory, fueling the engine of the justice I was about to deliver. The noose was tightening around my son's neck. The invisible pressure of a $500,000 gambling debt to a syndicate that broke kneecaps for sport was making him reckless. Elijah sat in my suite with a tablet showing the financial chessboard. He told me that Marcus had received a final warning text from his bookie that morning. "Pay up by Friday, or we pay a visit to your wife." That threat was the catalyst, the fear that stripped away his caution. Marcus pushed the closing date for Washington Plaza up by 2 days. He was frantic, calling the notary every hour, sweating through his expensive shirts, desperate to liquidate my legacy before his own legs were broken. Now it was time to turn the screw. Elijah looked at me and asked if I was ready to fire the warning shot. I nodded. "Do it," I said, my voice devoid of hesitation. Elijah tapped a command on his secure banking interface. He didn't freeze everything because that would be too obvious and might spook the prey. He simply placed a temporary hold on their discretionary spending accounts, flagging them for suspicious activity, a glitch that would cause maximum social damage. That evening, Marcus and Keisha went to dinner at the Onyx Club, the most exclusive country club in Chicago, where membership cost $50,000 a year and where status was the only currency that mattered. They needed to keep up appearances, to show their social circle that the Washington dynasty was thriving despite the rumors of my sudden disappearance. I watched the disaster unfold through the club's security cameras, which Otis had accessed through a contact in their security team. They ordered the tasting menu and a bottle of Dom Perignon. They laughed too loud, their smiles tight and brittle, performing happiness for an audience of peers who would eat them alive at the first sign of weakness. Then the bill came. Marcus handed over his Platinum American Express with a flourish. The waiter returned 2 minutes later, looking uncomfortable, holding the card with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "I am sorry, Mr. Washington," the waiter said, loud enough for the neighboring table to hear. The card was declined. Marcus laughed nervously, a high-pitched sound of panic. "Try it again," he demanded. "It is a bank error." The waiter shook his head. "I tried it 3 times, sir. The system says refer to issuer." Marcus tried a second card. Declined. A third. Declined. The silence at the table was deafening. People at nearby tables, their supposed friends, began to whisper behind raised napkins. Keisha turned pale, then red with fury. She had to write a personal check, which the manager accepted with a look of pity that was worse than scorn. They walked out of that dining room, stripping away their dignity with every step. They drove home in a silence that was heavy with unsaid accusations. A silence that exploded the moment they walked through their front door. Jasmine was waiting in the living room, pretending to read a psychology textbook, her phone recording from under a stack of architectural magazines on the coffee table. "You humiliated me," Keisha screamed, throwing her $3,000 clutch bag across the room. It knocked over a vase, shattering it against the wall. "You told me the cash flow was fixed. You told me the old man's accounts were ours now. I had to write a paper check, Marcus, like a pauper." "Shut up," Marcus roared back, pacing the room like a caged tiger, tearing at his tie as if it were strangling him. "It is a bank error, a glitch. Once the plaza sale goes through on Friday, we will have $5 million in liquid cash. We just need to hold it together for 48 hours. "Hold it together." Keisha laughed hysterically. "You are gambling away our future, Marcus. I saw the text messages on your phone. I know about the debt. I know about the people threatening us. If you don't sign that deed on Friday, we are dead." "I will sign it," Marcus shouted, his voice echoing off the walls of the house. "I bought them. I have practiced his signature 1,000 times. The notary is an idiot. He won't notice a thing. I will become Isaiah Washington for 5 minutes. Sign the papers, take the check, and we are free." Jasmine sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had it. The confession, the intent to commit a felony, the admission of the gambling debt. She waited until they stormed off to separate bedrooms, slamming doors like petulant children. Then she sent the file. I received it at midnight. Elijah was asleep in the guest chair. Otis was doing paperwork at the small desk. I played the audio file, hearing my son's voice vow to steal my identity and my legacy. The sadness I expected to feel was gone, burned away by the heat of the betrayal. "Wake up, Elijah," I said softly. The lawyer sat up, blinking, disoriented for a second before his sharp eyes focused. "What is it?" I played the clip. "I will become Isaiah Washington for 5 minutes, Marcus's voice said from the speaker, clear and damning. Elijah rubbed his face, a slow smile spreading across his lips. "That is conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and forgery, all wrapped in a nice little bow. We have enough to arrest him now, Isaiah." "No," I said, standing up and walking to the window. The city lights flickered below, indifferent to my pain. "If we arrest him now, he is just a man planning a crime. A lawyer could argue it was stress or a moment of madness. I want him to be a man who committed it. Let him go to the closing. Let him pick up the pen. Let him sign my name. I want the ink to be dry before the handcuffs go on." Otis looked up from his papers, taking off his glasses. "You are playing a dangerous game, Ike. If the funds transfer before we stop it, you might never get that building back. Legal battles over sold assets take years." I turned to face them, feeling the cold resolve of a man who has nothing left to lose but the truth. "I don't care about the building, Otis. I can build another building. I care about the lesson. Initiate phase 3. Tell the notary to proceed and tell the police to be ready. The trap is set." While Marcus was busy meticulously practicing my forged signature in the privacy of his study, Keisha decided to secure their future from a darker angle. She was a woman who believed in redundancy. She did not trust that my silence would last forever, so she decided to make it permanent. She arrived at Cedar Grove Manor at 2 in the afternoon on Wednesday, driving the Range Rover she had bought with my stolen money. She wore a trench coat and dark, oversized sunglasses, trying to look like a grieving relative, but carrying herself with the nervous energy of a criminal. She did not know that she was walking onto a stage we had set specifically for her. I was sitting in the security control room with Otis and Elijah, watching the high-definition monitors. The room was dark, smelling of stale coffee and ozone, illuminated only by the blue glow of the screens. Otis had briefed his head nurse, a formidable woman named Clara Gable, who had been running the floor for 30 years. Clara was the kind of nurse who could terrify a doctor with a single look, but who treated her patients with the tenderness of a mother. She despised people who abandoned their elders, and she was ready to play her part. We watched on screen 3 as Keisha approached the nurse's station. She smiled that tight artificial smile and asked to speak to Clara in private. They moved into the small glass-walled office. Otis turned up the volume on the hidden microphone we had installed in the lamp on Clara's desk. "Mrs. Washington," Clara said, her voice professional and cool. "What can I do for you today? Usually family members call before visiting." Keisha sat down, crossing her legs and leaning forward, looking around to ensure the door was closed. "I am very worried about Isaiah," she began, her voice dripping with fake concern. "My husband and I feel that he is suffering. He seems so agitated lately, so confused. It breaks our hearts to see him struggling to hold on to reality." Clara nodded, slowly playing along. "Transition is difficult for patients with his condition. We do our best to keep him comfortable." "Comfortable," Keisha repeated, latching onto the word. "Exactly. We want him to be comfortable. Really comfortable. Perhaps he needs something stronger to help him sleep, maybe something to help him sleep all day so he doesn't have to feel the pain of his confusion. You know what I mean, don't you?" She reached into her designer bag and pulled out a thick white envelope. She slid it across the desk until it touched Clara's hand. "There is $2,000 in there," she whispered, "and there will be another envelope every month if you can just ensure that Isaiah stays very calm, sedated, maybe a higher dose of antipsychotics or heavy tranquilizers, just to give him peace." In the control room, I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Elijah let out a low whistle of disbelief. "That is solicitation of medical malpractice and attempted assault with a controlled substance," he murmured. "She is literally paying someone to turn you into a vegetable, Isaiah." On the screen, Clara stared at the envelope for a long second. I held my breath. Acting was not her profession, and if she flinched now, the game was over. But Clara was a professional. She picked up the envelope and slipped it into her pocket. "I understand, Mrs. Washington," she said, keeping her face neutral. "We can adjust his medication protocol to ensure maximum sedation. Would you like to see him now? To say goodbye, perhaps, before he drifts off?" Keisha stood up, looking relieved and triumphant. "Yes, I would like that very much." I jumped up from the chair in the security room. "I have to get to the suite," I said. "I have to put on the performance of a lifetime." I ran down the back hallway, taking the service elevator up to the 3rd floor. I had 3 minutes before they arrived. I tore off my tie and unbuttoned my collar. I messed up my hair, which I had kept neatly combed. I took out my dentures, placing them in a glass of water to make my face look sunken and old. I sat in the wheelchair by the window and slumped over, letting my mouth hang open slightly, focusing my eyes on a stain on the carpet, emptying my mind of the engineer and letting in the ghost. When the door opened, I did not look up. Keisha walked in with Clara behind her. I heard the click of Keisha's heels on the floor. She stopped a few feet away, looking at me with a mixture of disgust and satisfaction. "See," she told Clara. "He is already gone. There is nothing behind those eyes. You are doing him a favor." She stepped closer, entering my personal space. The scent of her expensive perfume was overpowering, choking me. She leaned down until her lips were inches from my ear, thinking I was too far gone to understand, thinking I was just a shell. "You should have just died, Isaiah," she whispered, her voice venomous and real. "You should have died and left us the money. But don't worry. Soon you won't know the difference between day and night. Sleep tight, old man." She patted my cheek, a condescending tap that felt like a slap. Then she straightened up and walked out without looking back, confident that she had just purchased my silence and my slow demise. I waited until the door clicked shut and I heard her footsteps fade down the hall. Then I sat up straight. I put my dentures back in and smoothed my hair. The door opened again and Otis walked in, looking pale. Clara was right behind him, holding the envelope of cash in a plastic evidence bag. "I got it all on tape," Otis said, his voice shaking with rage. "I cannot believe she actually did it." I looked at the plastic bag in Clara's hand. The price of my mind was $2,000. I stood up, walking to the window to watch Keisha get into her car and drive away. "She thinks she just sedated the problem," I said, my voice hard as steel. "She has no idea she just woke up the prosecutor. The gray Friday morning arrived with a heavy sky that hung low over Chicago like a judgment waiting to fall. I sat in the command center of my suite, flanked by Otis and Elijah. On the large monitor mounted on the wall, we had a direct video feed from the conference room of Prestige Title Company. Elijah had called in a favor from the owner of the firm, a man named Samuel who owed his career to a contract I gave him 20 years ago. Samuel had agreed to place a hidden camera in the ventilation duct, not to stop the crime but to witness it in high definition. There sat my son Marcus wearing a $3,000 Italian suit that could not hide the sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was drumming his fingers on the polished mahogany table, which was a nervous tic he had developed as a child whenever he lied about his homework. Across from him sat the buyer, a shark from a venture capital firm named Sterling, who looked at his watch every 30 seconds, clearly annoyed that he was buying a $20 million building for 15 and still had to wait for paperwork. At the head of the table sat the notary, a man named Mr. Henderson, whom Elijah had briefed that morning. Henderson was instructed to follow the procedure to the letter, but to allow the signing to proceed. He was the bait in our trap, the impartial witness who would seal the door shut. "I apologize for the delay, gentlemen," Marcus said, his voice tinny through the microphone but clear enough to hear the tremor of fear. "My father is in a specialized facility in Europe, as you know, and communicating with his doctors to get the final clearance took longer than expected." "Just get it done," Marcus Sterling snapped, checking his platinum Rolex. "I have a flight to New York at 3, and if this deed isn't signed in 10 minutes, I'm walking away and taking my offer with me." Marcus went pale. The threat of losing the deal, of losing the lifeline that would save him from the bookies, terrified him more than the law. "I am ready right now," he said, reaching for the heavy Mont Blanc pen that lay on the leather blotter. "Wait, mister," Henderson said, holding up a hand. The notary adjusted his glasses, looking from Marcus to the document with a professional scrutiny that made Marcus flinch. "I need to verify one last time for the record. You are signing as the power of attorney for Isaiah Washington due to his incapacitation, is that correct?" "Yes," Marcus said. He barely hesitated. It was a lie he had told so many times it sounded like truth to him now. "And you affirm under penalty of perjury that Isaiah Washington is mentally incompetent to sign for himself, and that you have full legal authority to execute this sale." "I affirm it," Marcus said, his voice stronger now, pushed by the desperation of the debt. In the suite, Elijah leaned forward, his eyes locked on the screen. "Here it comes," he whispered. "This is the kill shot. Once that ink hits the paper, there is no going back." "Mr." Henderson slid the heavy document across the table. It was the deed to Washington Plaza, the building that represented my life's work, the steel and glass monument to my rise from poverty. Marcus looked at the paper, and for a second, just 1 second, I saw his hand hover. I wondered if he was remembering the day I took him to the groundbreaking ceremony, if he remembered the hard hat I put on his small head, if he felt even a ghost of a conscience. "Don't do it, son," I whispered to the screen, knowing he couldn't hear me. "Put the pen down and walk away. There is still time to be a man." But the fear of the debt was stronger than the love of the father. Marcus gripped the pen. He lowered the nib to the paper. On the signature line, clearly marked grantor, he did not sign Marcus Washington. He signed Isaiah Washington. He carefully mimicked the loops of my capital I, the sharp angle of my W. He forged my name with a practice born of desperation. The scratching of the pen on the paper sounded like a scream in the silence of my room. It was done. He had not just stolen a building, he had stolen my identity. He had erased me to save himself. "Thank you," Marcus said, exhaling a breath he must have been holding for weeks. He handed the document back to the notary with a trembling hand. "Mr." Henderson stamped it with his official seal. The sound of the stamper hitting the paper was the final nail in the coffin. The crime was consummated, recorded in high definition, witnessed by a notary. The trap had snapped shut, and my son was inside. Elijah sat back in his chair and picked up his phone. "That is a Class 1 felony. Aggravated forgery. Fraud over $1 million. He tapped the screen, sending the video clip to the secure server. "We have him, Isaiah. He can never talk his way out of this." I watched Marcus shake hands with the buyer. He was smiling now, a wide, relief-filled smile. He thought he had just won $5 million. He thought he had escaped the consequences. He had no idea that he had just signed his own arrest warrant. "Let him enjoy the weekend," I said, my voice flat and cold. "Let him feel safe. Let him spend the money in his head. On Monday morning we take everything back." Otis put a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay, Ike?" I looked at the image of my smiling son one last time before telling Elijah to cut the feed. "No, Otis, I am not okay. I just watched my son commit suicide with a fountain pen, but I am ready for what comes next." The victory at the title company acted like an accelerant on Marcus's ego, burning away whatever scraps of caution he had left. He walked out of that conference room believing he was untouchable, convinced that he had successfully erased my agency with a single stroke of a pen. But he made a classic strategic error. He mistook a tactical withdrawal for a surrender. 2 days after the forgery, Elijah arrived at the suite with a face darker than a thunderhead. He placed a thick stack of court documents on the desk with a heavy thud that rattled the lamp. "Marcus is not satisfied with just stealing the building, Isaiah. He wants to make sure you never come back to claim it. He has filed an emergency petition for plenary guardianship." I picked up the document, feeling the cold, bureaucratic weight of it. The legal language was dry, but the intent was violent. Plenary guardianship was the legal equivalent of civil death. If granted, it would strip me of my right to vote, my right to marry, my right to manage my own money, and my right to choose where I lived. It would reduce me from a citizen to a piece of property owned and managed by my son. "Look at Exhibit A," Elijah said, pointing to a stapled affidavit. He found a doctor to sign off on it. I read the report from a Dr. Lawrence Vance, a psychiatrist I had never met in my life. The report detailed a fabrication so complete it was almost impressive. It claimed that Dr. Vance had examined me via telehealth at the request of the family, and found me to be suffering from stage 6 Alzheimer's with violent paranoid delusions. It stated that I was a danger to myself and others and required 24-hour lockdown supervision. The date of the examination was listed as last Thursday, a day I spent playing chess with Otis and reviewing bridge schematics. "This Dr. Vance?" I asked, looking up at Elijah. "Who is he?" Elijah sneered. "He is a hired gun with a medical license. He operates out of a strip mall near the airport and specializes in rubber stamping disability claims and prescription refills for cash. I ran his financials. He received a $5,000 consulting fee from a shell company registered to Keisha just 3 days ago, so they bought a diagnosis to bury me," I said, feeling a cold calm settle over me. "When is the hearing?" "Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, Elijah replied, "in probate courtroom 4B before Judge Walters." Walters is a stickler for procedure and he hates elder abuse. But usually these hearings are formalities. The petitioner shows up with the doctor's note. The elderly person is usually not present because they are locked away, and the judge signs the order to protect the senior. "Marcus is counting on you being an empty chair." "He expects an empty chair," I said, standing up and walking to the closet where Otis had hung my best charcoal gray suit, which he had retrieved from my apartment. "But he is going to get a full house." We spent the next 48 hours assembling what Elijah called the nuclear file. It was a 3-ring binder, 4 inches thick, organized with the ruthless efficiency of a war plan. Tab 1 contained the affidavits from Otis and the nursing staff proving I was lucid and held against my will. Tab 2 held the financial forensic report showing the theft. Tab 3 held the video of the forgery. Tab 4 was the audio recording of Keisha bribing the nurse. And Tab 5, the most devastating of all, was the testimony Jasmine had prepared. Jasmine came to the suite on Monday night, the eve of the battle. She looked pale and terrified. "Grandpa," she said, her voice trembling, "I have never been in a court before. What if I freeze? What if Dad looks at me and I can't say it?" I took her hands in mine. "Look at me, Jasmine. You are not betraying your father. You are stopping a crime. You are saving him from his own worst impulses. If he gets away with this, he will destroy himself and everything I built for you. Telling the truth is the ultimate act of loyalty, even if it hurts." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "I recorded them again last night," she said, handing me a USB drive. "Dad was celebrating. He told Mom that by Wednesday morning he would have the power to sell the rest of the properties and put you in a state facility so they could stop paying Cedar Grove. He called it consolidation." I added the drive to the binder, the final nail in the coffin. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in the dark, listening to the hum of the city, thinking about the little boy I used to carry on my shoulders to watch the parades on Michigan Avenue. I tried to reconcile that innocent child with the man who was planning to stand before a judge and declare me insane for profit. Grief is a heavy stone, but anger is a lever, and by the time the sun began to bleed through the curtains, I had moved the stone. At 6 in the morning, Otis entered the room carrying a cup of black coffee and a garment bag. "It is time, Ike," he said softly. "Time to suit up." I showered and shaved with the precision of a ritual. I put on the crisp white shirt, the silk tie, the charcoal suit that fit me perfectly. I fastened my cufflinks, which were gold compasses, a gift from my engineering team when I retired. I looked in the mirror and I did not see a victim. I did not see a patient. I saw Isaiah Washington, builder of bridges, father of a traitor, architect of justice. Elijah arrived at 7 looking sharp and predatory in his navy suit. "The car is waiting downstairs," he said, checking his watch. "We have a 40-minute drive to the courthouse. Are you ready to rise from the dead?" I picked up my cane not because I needed it to walk, but because it was a weapon of authority, a symbol of the patriarch. I turned to Otis and shook his hand. "Thank you for being my shelter in the storm, old friend." Otis smiled, a grim, satisfied smile. "Go give them hell, Ike. I will be right behind you in the second car with the nursing logs." I walked out of the suite and down the hall for the last time. The nurses who knew the truth watched me go with silent nods of respect. I stepped out into the cool morning air of Chicago, the city I helped build, and I felt the concrete under my feet solid and real. Marcus thought he was walking into a coronation. He had no idea he was walking into an execution. The walk from the elevators to the front lobby of Cedar Grove Manor felt like a victory lap on a track I had paved with my own suffering. Otis walked beside me, not as a warden but as an honor guard, his footsteps falling in rhythm with the tap of my cane against the tile floor. We passed the nurse's station where Clara stood with a small smile playing on her lips. She nodded to me, a silent acknowledgement of the secret we shared and the justice that was coming. I tipped my head in return, thanking her without words for refusing to sell her soul for Keisha's bribe. We reached the reception desk where the same woman who had processed my admission 3 months ago sat behind the glass partition. Her name tag read Karen, and she was typing furiously on a computer, oblivious to the resurrection taking place 5 feet away. Otis cleared his throat, a sound like grinding gravel. Karen looked up and her hands froze over the keyboard. Her eyes widened, taking in the charcoal suit, the silk tie, the freshly polished shoes, and the undeniable clarity in my gaze. "Mr. Washington," she stammered, pushing her chair back as if she were seeing a ghost. "I thought you were. I mean, the file says you are in the secure wing." "The file is being updated, Karen," Otis said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the counter with a crisp snap. "Mr. Washington is being discharged effective immediately. His condition has spontaneously resolved. Please log him out of the system and mark his file as closed." She looked from the paper to Otis and back to me, completely bewildered by this defiance of the narrative my son had spun. I stepped forward, placing my hands on the cool granite of the counter, leaning in until I caught her scent of cheap vanilla perfume. "Good morning, Karen," I said, my voice deep and steady, the voice of a man who commanded construction sites with hundreds of workers. "I believe you are holding a plastic bag containing the clothes I arrived in. You can keep them. Burn them for all I care. I won't be needing the costume of a victim anymore." She swallowed hard and nodded, unable to speak, simply pressing the buzzer that unlocked the main glass doors. The sound of that lock disengaging was sweeter than any symphony I had ever heard. It was the sound of the cage opening, the sound of the stone rolling away from the tomb. Elijah was waiting at the curb next to his black Lincoln Town car, the engine idling with a low purr. He opened the rear door with the deference of a chauffeur but the grin of a shark sensing blood in the water. "Your carriage awaits, Mr. Washington," he said. "We have 40 minutes to get to the courthouse. Traffic is light on the interstate, so we should arrive with time to spare for a dramatic entrance." I settled into the leather seat, feeling the luxury of the vehicle not as a comfort but as a restoration of my status. Otis climbed into the front passenger seat, clutching the box of medical logs and affidavits like it was the nuclear football. Elijah merged into the morning traffic, and we began the drive toward the city center. As we crossed the bridge over the river, the skyline of Chicago rose up to greet us, a jagged range of steel and glass piercing the gray sky. I looked out the window and saw the buildings I had touched, the West Side Bridge where I had almost died in '84, the Freedom Tower where I had pioneered a new wind-bracing technique, and there in the distance, standing tall and defiant, was Washington Plaza. I saw the cranes nearby, the construction crews starting their day, the life of the city moving forward. Marcus had tried to sell this view. He had tried to cash out my legacy for poker chips and vacations. Rage flared in my chest, but I tamped it down, forcing it into the cold, hard engine of my resolve. I was not going there to scream. I was going there to dismantle him. We pulled up to the Cook County Courthouse at 8:45. The building was an imposing structure of gray stone and massive pillars designed to intimidate the guilty and reassure the innocent. Today it felt like my arena. Jasmine's Honda Civic pulled up behind us a moment later. She got out looking pale in a black dress, holding her binder of evidence against her chest like a shield. I climbed out of the car, straightening my jacket. The wind whipped at my tie, but I stood firm. Jasmine ran to my side, slipping her arm through mine. Her hand was trembling. "Grandpa," she whispered, "I think I am going to be sick." I patted her hand. "You are going to be fine. Just remember, you are not the one on trial today. You are the witness. The light that scatters the roaches. Just look at me if you get scared." We formed a phalanx on the sidewalk. Me in the center with Jasmine on my arm, Elijah on my left carrying the legal briefcase, and Otis on my right carrying the medical evidence, 4 generations of truth, walking toward the steps of judgment. We passed through the metal detectors without a word, the guards wanding us and waving us through. The elevator ride to the 4th floor was silent, the numbers lighting up one by one, counting down the seconds to the confrontation. Ding! The doors opened onto a hallway polished to a mirror shine, teeming with lawyers and clerks rushing about their business. Elijah checked his watch. 8:58, he said. Perfect timing. The bailiff just unlocked the doors. Marcus and his lawyer are likely already inside, setting up their papers, rehearsing their sad faces for the judge. I walked down the hall, the tap of my cane echoing off the marble walls. My heart was beating a slow, steady war drum. I reached the double doors of courtroom 4B, heavy oak doors with brass handles worn smooth by the hands of thousands of people seeking justice or mercy. Elijah reached for the handle and looked back at me, ready to raise the dead Isaiah. I tightened my grip on my cane and lifted my chin. "Open it," I commanded. "Let's go introduce my son to the man he thought he buried." The heavy oak doors swung open with a groan that sounded like a coffin lid being lifted from the inside. Elijah held the door wide and I stepped across the threshold into the hush of courtroom 4B. The air inside was cool and smelled of furniture polish and old paper. The room was divided by the center aisle, like a church, but instead of an altar, there was the high bench of judgment, where the Honorable Judge Walters sat peering over his spectacles. My son Marcus stood at the plaintiff's table with his back to me. His shoulders were slumped in a perfect performance of filial grief. His voice was trembling as he addressed the court. "Your Honor, it breaks my heart to do this," he was saying, his voice thick with fake tears. "My father was a great man once, but the dementia has turned him into a danger to himself. He wanders into traffic. He forgets who I am. Locking him down is the only way to keep him safe." I stopped in the middle of the aisle and let the tip of my cane strike the floor with a sharp crack that echoed off the high ceiling. The sound cut through Marcus's lie like a gunshot. He froze mid-sentence. His lawyer, a slick man in a cheap suit, turned around first, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of the man who was supposed to be a drooling invalid in a Swiss clinic. Then Marcus turned. The movement was slow and terrified, as if he were fighting the urge to run. When his eyes met mine, the blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. He was looking at a ghost, a vengeance in charcoal gray. "Father," he whispered, the word escaping him like a curse. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The court reporter stopped typing. Judge Walters leaned forward, his eyebrows knitting together in confusion and annoyance. "Mr. Washington," the judge said, his voice booming, "I was under the impression that the subject of this guardianship petition was bedridden and mentally incapacitated in a facility overseas." Elijah stepped forward from behind me, his voice ringing out clear and sharp. "Your Honor, my name is Elijah Barnes and I represent Mr. Isaiah Washington, who is standing right here. He is neither bedridden nor incapacitated. He is present and he is objecting." Marcus tried to speak. "Your Honor, he is confused. He shouldn't be here. He is having an episode." I did not let him finish. I walked forward, the tap of my cane the only sound in the room. I did not look at my son. I looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, I am not having an episode. I am having a reckoning. I request permission to approach the bench and speak for myself." Judge Walters looked from the trembling son to the stoic father. He slammed his gavel down. "Permission granted. "Take the stand, Mr. Washington." I walked past Marcus. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled like sweat and desperation. I climbed the 3 steps to the witness box and sat down. I placed my cane across my knees and folded my hands. I looked out at the courtroom, at Jasmine sitting in the front row clutching her binder, at Otis nodding encouragement, and finally at Marcus, who had sunk into his chair looking small and broken. "Raise your right hand," the bailiff said. I raised it. My hand was steady as a steel beam. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do," I said, "and God knows I have waited 3 months to tell it." "State your name for the record." "Isaiah Marcus Washington, Sr.," I said, claiming the name my son had tried to steal. "Mr. Washington," the judge asked, leaning back, "your son claims you are suffering from stage 6 Alzheimer's, that you are violent and paranoid. What do you have to say to that?" I looked at the judge with the calm intensity of an engineer explaining a structural failure. "Your Honor, on March 17th, my son drove me to a nursing home called Cedar Grove Manor under the pretense of a birthday lunch. He dragged me into the lobby and told the staff I was demented. He stripped me of my wallet, my phone, and my late wife's watch." I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Marcus flinched as if I had hit him. He told me that I was expired inventory. I continued, my voice rising slightly in volume but never losing control. He told me I was trash that needed to be taken out. He told me that I was a burden on his lifestyle and that I should rot in that room until I died. The courtroom was deadly silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. I turned my gaze to Marcus, who was staring at the table, unable to meet my eyes. "I am not a file to be managed, Your Honor. I am not a checkbook to be balanced. I am the man who built this city. I am the man who taught that boy how to tie his shoes, and for the last 90 days I have been a prisoner in a cage he paid for with my own money. But I did not come here today to ask for pity. I came here to present the receipts." I signaled to Elijah. He stood up and placed the thick binder on the judge's bench, the nuclear file. "Your Honor," I said, "inside that binder is not just my testimony. It is the surveillance video of my son forging my signature on a deed 3 days ago. It is the audio recording of his wife bribing a nurse to poison me, and it is the bank records showing he has stolen over $200,000 while I sat in a room with bars on the windows." Marcus let out a strangled sob. His lawyer was frantically trying to stack papers into his briefcase, looking like he wanted to vanish. Judge Walters opened the binder to the first tab, his face hardening as he read the first affidavit. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "This is not a guardianship hearing anymore," the judge said, his voice low and dangerous. "This is a crime scene." Elijah moved with the precision of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. He connected his laptop to the courtroom's audio-visual system, and the large projection screen dropped from the ceiling with a mechanical whir that sounded like the blade of a guillotine descending. Marcus turned in his chair, his eyes darting from the screen to the exit, but the bailiff had already moved to block the double doors. My son was trapped in the box he had built for me. "Your Honor, if you will direct your attention to the screen," Elijah said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "Exhibit A is surveillance footage from the conference room of Prestige Title Company, recorded exactly 72 hours ago." The video flickered to life in high definition. There was Marcus sitting at the mahogany table, sweating in his expensive suit. There was the notary, and there was the deed to Washington Plaza. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, as everyone watched my son pick up the pen. The audio was crisp. "I affirm it," the recorded voice of Marcus said, a ghostly echo of his crime filling the air. We watched as the pen touched the paper. We watched the forgery happen in real time. The loops and lines of my name being stolen by the hand I used to hold when crossing the street. Judge Walters watched the screen with a face made of stone, his jaw tightening as the stamp hit the paper. He paused the video on the frame where Marcus was smiling and shaking hands with the buyer. The judge looked down at Marcus, who was now weeping silently into his hands. "Mr. Washington," the judge asked, his voice dangerously quiet, "is that you on the screen signing a federal document with your father's name while claiming he is incapacitated?" Marcus could not speak. He just shook his head, a pathetic denial of reality. "We are not done, Your Honor," Elijah continued. "Exhibit B is an audio recording provided by Mrs. Keisha Washington, who is present in the gallery today." I turned slightly in my chair to look at the front row. Keisha was sitting there behind the defense table, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and dark glasses, looking like she was attending a funeral. She stiffened as her name was called. Elijah pressed a button, and her voice filled the room, sharp and venomous. "I hope the old man croaks before the summer." The recording played, clear as a bell. "If he hangs on for another year, the fees are going to eat our profit. Just give him the heavy sedatives, Clara. Make him sleep until he stops waking up." Keisha let out a gasp that sounded like a shriek. She stood up, knocking her purse to the floor. "That is fake," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at Elijah. "That is AI. I never said that. This is a setup." "Sit down, madam," Judge Walters roared, banging his gavel with enough force to crack the wood block. "One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt immediately." Keisha collapsed back onto the bench, her face pale as ash. She looked at Marcus for help, but he was staring at the table, drowning in his own shame. Finally, Elijah pointed to the front row. "Your Honor, for our final piece of evidence, we have the sworn testimony of Miss Jasmine Washington, the daughter of the defendants, who gathered this evidence to save her grandfather's life." Judge Walters looked at Jasmine, who stood up slowly. She was trembling, but her chin was high. "Miss Washington," the judge asked softly, "do you verify the authenticity of these recordings?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jasmine said, her voice small but steady. "I recorded them in our kitchen. They planned it all. The nursing home, the forgery, the doctors, everything." The judge closed the heavy binder with a finality that sounded like a prison door slamming shut. He took off his reading glasses and looked at Marcus and Keisha with a gaze of pure, unadulterated disgust. "I have sat on this bench for 20 years. Judge Walters said, his voice rumbling like thunder. "I have seen murderers, thieves, and liars, but I have never seen a betrayal this calculated and this cold." He turned to the court clerk. "The petition for guardianship is denied with extreme prejudice. Furthermore, I am declaring this a criminal matter. Bailiff, take Mr. Marcus Washington and Mrs. Keisha Washington into custody immediately on charges of aggravated forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and grand larceny." The room erupted into chaos. 2 U.S. Marshals moved in from the back of the room, their heavy boots thudding against the floor. Marcus stood up, knocking his chair over. "No," he shouted. "You can't do this. I am a pillar of this community." The marshals didn't care about his community standing. They spun him around, and I heard the metallic click of handcuffs ratcheting tight, the sound of his freedom ending. Across the room, another officer was handcuffing Keisha, who was sobbing hysterically, screaming that she had been coerced. They dragged Marcus past the plaintiff's table towards the side exit that led to the holding cells. As he passed the witness box, he stopped fighting and looked at me. His eyes were wild with fear and confusion. "Dad," he screamed, pulling against the marshal's grip. "Dad, tell them to stop. I did this for the family. I did it for us." I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane, looking down at the son who had tried to erase me. The sadness in my heart was a heavy weight, but my voice was steady. "No, son," I said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You didn't do this for the family. You did this to the family." The marshals shoved him through the door and he was gone. The heavy thud of the exit closing was the period at the end of the sentence. I sat back down in the witness chair, feeling suddenly very old and very tired. Elijah put a hand on my shoulder and Otis nodded solemnly from the front row. Justice had been served, but it tasted like ashes in my mouth. The dust of the courtroom battle had settled, leaving behind a quiet clarity that felt like the air after a summer storm. 30 days had passed since the gavel fell and the marshals dragged my son away in handcuffs. 30 days of legal meetings and depositions, and the slow, painful process of untangling my finances from his greed. But today was not about the past. It was about securing the future. I sat in the leather chair of Elijah's corner office overlooking the Chicago River, the same river I had helped bridge 40 years ago. Across from me sat Jasmine, looking older and wiser than her 20 years. Next to her was Otis, wearing a suit that was slightly too tight across the shoulders. "Let us proceed," Elijah said, sliding the thick document across the polished mahogany desk. "This is the last will and testament of Isaiah Washington, replacing all previous versions." I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand, not with weight but with consequence. This was the final architectural drawing of my life. First, Elijah read, his voice formal and steady. "To my granddaughter, Jasmine Washington, I bequeath 80% of my total estate, including the Washington Plaza building and the master trust. These assets will be held in a protected trust until she turns 25, ensuring she completes her education without the burden of sudden wealth." Jasmine began to cry silently, not for the money I knew, but for the trust I was placing in her. She was the guardian of the legacy now. Second, Elijah continued, to Otis Jenkins and the Cedar Grove Manor facility I donate the sum of $500,000 for the construction of a new recreation wing and legal defense fund for abandoned elders. Otis tried to protest, raising a hand, but I silenced him with a look. You gave me shelter when I was homeless, Otis. You gave me a weapon when I was unarmed. Take the money and build a fortress for the next old man who gets dropped off at your door. Then came the silence. The air in the room grew thin. We all knew what was coming next. The section regarding my only son. Third, regarding Marcus Washington. Elijah paused, looking at me over his reading glasses. I nodded. Proceed. I hereby disinherit Marcus Washington from any direct access to my estate. He receives $0.00. However, I establish a singular path to redemption known herein as the clause. Jasmine looked up, wiping her eyes. The clause, Grandpa. I leaned forward. Your father thinks he is too good for hard work, Jasmine. He thinks manual labor is for other people. He thinks the elderly are waste. So I'm going to give him a job. Elijah read the text. If Marcus Washington wishes to receive a monthly stipend of $2,000 upon his release from prison, he must complete the following conditions for a period of 5 consecutive years. Condition 1. He must accept full-time employment at Cedar Grove Manor as a member of the janitorial staff. He will mop the floors. He will clean the bathrooms. He will change the sheets of the patients he once despised. Condition 2. He must restitute every single dollar stolen from the estate, plus interest via payroll deduction. Condition 3. He must attend weekly therapy to deconstruct his narcissism. Otis let out a low whistle. You are making him a janitor in the place he locked you up. I am giving him an education, Otis, I replied. He needs to learn that dignity is not found in a bank account or a designer suit. It is found in the service of others. If he scrubs those floors for 5 years, if he humbles himself, if he pays back what he took, then maybe, just maybe, he will become the man I thought I was raising. And if he refuses, then he gets nothing. The choice is entirely his. I signed the document. The scratch of the nib on the paper was the final sound of the war ending. It was done. The blueprint was drawn. Now it was up to Marcus to decide if he wanted to build or remain in the rubble. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Cedar Grove Manor, not as a prisoner but as a benefactor. The smell of lemon cleaner was the same, but the fear was gone, replaced by the sounds of construction crews expanding the west wing. I walked to the glass observation window looking into the main corridor where the residents gathered for their afternoon activities. Through the glass, I saw him. Marcus was wearing a gray maintenance jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big. He was holding a heavy industrial mop, pushing the soapy water across the linoleum with a rhythmic, repetitive motion. He looked older. The arrogance that had defined him for 40 years had been scrubbed away, leaving something raw and human underneath. He stopped for a moment, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve, and he saw me standing there, leaning on my cane on the other side of the glass. He did not look away this time, and he did not sneer. There was no hate in his eyes, only a deep, exhausted resignation. He simply nodded, a small gesture of acknowledgement, and then he put his head down and went back to work, wringing out the mop. He had accepted the clause. He had chosen the hard road of redemption over the easy road of resentment. Watching him clean the floors of the prison he had built for me, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The structure of our family had collapsed, but now we were clearing the rubble to build something real. Later that afternoon, I sat on a bench in Millennium Park with Jasmine. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city skyline. Grandpa, she asked, resting her head on my shoulder, do you think he will make it? Do you think he will stick it out for 5 years? I looked at the steel bridges spanning the distance in the fading light. I don't know, Jasmine, I said honestly. Bridges are designed to handle stress, but they only hold up if the foundation is solid. Your father is pouring his foundation now, one day at a time. For the first time in his life, he is building something with his own hands, even if it is just a clean floor. I closed my eyes, listening to the city hum around us. I had spent my life thinking that my legacy was the steel and glass towers that scraped the sky. I was wrong. My legacy was sitting right next to me, holding my hand, and my legacy was also the man with the mop, learning that the only way up is to start at the bottom. Justice had been served cold. But love was the thing that would keep us warm in the winter, and for the first time in a long time, I was not just an architect of buildings, I was an architect of hope. True legacy is not found in the inheritance we leave behind, but in the character we build within our children. A parent's most difficult duty is not to shield their offspring from every storm but to teach them how to stand in the rain. We often mistake enabling for love, but a child who is never allowed to feel the weight of consequences will eventually be crushed by them. Sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing them to hit rock bottom so they can finally learn how to climb. If you enjoyed this story, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales of justice and redemption. And tell us in the comments if you think Isaiah made the right choice.